to the United Nations, because of this doctrine that was put in place in 2002, after President Bush went to the United Nations and filed what's called a salvage claim, stating that African Americans and Mexican Americans had destroyed the infrastructure of the United States with food stamps, welfare, home loans, and student loans unrepaid, that the United States needed to be salvaged. Salvage meaning that it needed to be saved from these individuals that were destroying it and had destroyed it. The United Nations granted that salvage claim to the United States, giving the United States to the authority to now remove Mexican Americans and African Americans from the lands of the United States. We have a problem that's encroaching and people don't realize it.
So let me ask you, okay, really quickly, because you said you are the founder of NAAIP, the National Association for Advancement of Indigenous People.
That's correct.
The founder means you began.
That's correct.
So prior to you, who was fighting, or who are the forefathers of indigenous people? Who are the forefathers who's been trying to change policy prior to you? Because unless you are 120 years old and just look really good, I don't know who's been fighting all of these years prior to you for national, international advancement of national advancement for the advancement of indigenous people.
You know, Malcolm said the rock landed on us.
My baby said Malcolm. I don't think y'all understand how Malcolm is echoing everywhere right now.
Malcolm said the rock landed on us after he returned from across the waters, because he learned new things. He learned that the rock had truly landed on us and that we were from these lands. Dr. King also stated in his I Have a Dream speech that we are held in exile in our own homeland. Now, we have a lot of scholars and etymologists out there, and individuals are missing the point. How can you be held in exile in your own homeland without it being your own homeland? And this is the point that we have to realize. And again, I'm going to go back to the United Nations again, because it's very vital that individuals understand that right now UN troops are amassing in Virginia, in Maryland, and in places out west in Arizona. They are bringing their equipment in right now because the president has ordered 1 million UN soldiers for the United States.
Hold on, I just saw this. I just saw the tanks and the trucks, and this was just recently posted like 24 hours ago.
The Bureau of Land Management has been confiscating the land of ranchers. Black folks in this country are not ranchers. So the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, has been confiscating land of white ranchers in this country for the purpose of giving it back and using it for the debt.
Really?
With the Sustainable Development Agenda and deadline that the United Nations put in place, this was put in place because the United States has tremendous debt. And that debt has to be paid to China. That debt has to be paid to Russia and other countries. And the only means of paying for that debt is with the land, because the US dollar is no longer accepted by Russia nor China. And the debt has to be paid with the land. So what was put in place was deadlines were put in place for indigenous or Aborigine people in America to make land claims and identity claims. And that deadline expired December 31st, 2014, meaning that after December 31st, 2014, no one could come forward again and make a land claim or identity claim saying, I'm Indian, or my family was Indian and I have rights to A, B,
and
C,
that
and D.
ended in 2014.
That ended 2014.
So what do I do now?
There's absolutely nothing that you can do.
Nothing?
There's absolutely
But
nothing.
I just got my blood tested by XYZ and they told me my blood is 67% Massachusetts, Algonquin.
And you also found all these documents that shows that your family was Indian and had lands, etc. The deadline is passed.
How?
Because it has been put in place by the international community. The Barack Obama, under the Copenhagen Treaty, gave the United States Constitution away to the United Nations in 2010. This is why the courts are going rogue, because they no longer have to uphold the Constitution. But this is not something to be announced to all these radical white folks, because they'll start shooting up the place because the Constitution is gone. And in speaking of shooting up the place, Barack has had over 18 incidents with machine gun fire being fired inside the White House and outside and from outside the White House. So we're dealing with a president that has suffered a great deal of attack in a lot of areas. So we're dealing with the president that can't come forward and say, "Black man, wake up. Black man, go and get these books. Go and realize that you are not from this continent of Africa." We're all a part of the diaspora. Every life on the planet is a part of the diaspora. But the key is for the United Nations and for all these conscious groups running around the country. The key is simple. How long have your people been here in America?
We don't know.
If your people were in America prior to the establishment of the United States, then the United Nations says that you are indigenous. Now, see, that's key. Because if you are indigenous, then you have international protections as an individual, as a group. If you are not indigenous, then you don't belong here, as Donald Trump says.
And he's right.
He's moving on what he already knows exists in policy. But the public doesn't know it exists in policy. The public is not aware that the Sustainable Development Agenda and the claims against America put in motion the ability for the United States politicians to start removing African Americans and Mexican Americans from this country, which is what they've been trying to do since they came in. James Monroe and a few others with $16,000 purchased the lands called Liberia. And then they began shipping thousands of Negro Indians to Liberia to populate those lands of Liberia.
So Liberia wasn't already populated?
The people in Liberia know that they are from America.
Hold on, what?
I've met diplomats, ambassadors at the United Nations from Liberia, and they announced that they know that they are from America. They were shipped to America as immigrants, not IMM, but E-immigrants. One who shipped from his own home to another home. So there was massive immigration taking place in America in the 1700s, early 1800s, with Negroes being shipped wholesale out of this country. So if you're shipping Negroes out of this country, why are you shipping Negroes into this country? Well, the few that you did ship into this country were shipped in to assimilate the mindset, to convince the others who were 12 years a slave and stolen as children from various parts of the country, to assimilate them into the belief that they came on these ships. This is what's been done. There were no ships, not the way that they put the ships. There were less than 350,000 Africans that came to these lands.
But they said it's like 1.7 million though. It was in the millions. That's history tells us, books tell us, historians tell us. They came over in the millions.
They came over to where?
They came to America.
Which part of America? The Americas? Understand, during this period, there were no motors on ships. Use your common sense and look into the National Geographic and see what the current flow of the ocean is. It flows from the tip of Africa straight down into the Caribbean, bypassing the United States altogether. So you're saying millions were shipped to the Caribbean, then those millions were then shipped to the United States? No, it's not in anybody's records. The records that exist reflect that Negroes were removed from these lands, not brought to these lands.
So what does that mean today in 2016?
In 2016, I don't know where you're going, but I'm gonna say this. In 2016, the Negro, the black man, is in terrible trouble. He's really in trouble, and we have institutions that exist to assist in getting these people out of trouble, but these institutions are not moving. The Moorish Science Temple, for one, and I'm blasting out this morning. The Moorish Science Temple has a huge following of people. And those people, many of them, if not all of them, are Aborigine. Congress ruled last year that a colored birth certificate meant that you were American Indian. If you had colored on your birth certificate, you are American Indian.
I have my cousins.
So many thousands of our people who are members of the Moorish Science Temple, members of the Nation of Islam, they have colored on their birth certificates. And those are American Indian people. But the institutions that they are a part of are not coming forward to save these people the way that they can be saved.
What do you mean be saved? What is my salvation?
What is your salvation as an African American? And I just told you that the African American is slated to be removed from this country, from his own lands. Is that salvation?
No, but you also told me that as of 2014, I can't claim my land.
NAAIP filed a $3.7 billion claim against the Commerce Department in 2014.
Ooh.
We filed this claim to the United Nations to meet the Sustainable Development Agenda deadline. We are the only institution that filed a claim to fulfill and meet the deadline. That claim that we filed, we created a back door in that particular claim, allowing us to bring forward additional information, which means people's names and property claims are still being brought through under the Commerce Department claim by NAAIP. We are the only institution in the country, on the planet, that's capable, under law, of bringing Aborigines, Negroes, or individuals of Negro descent who have colored on their birth certificates, bringing them out of that African American construct into the international construct. Imagine if the Nation of Islam only had 600 people that were Aborigine within the Nation of Islam. Then now the Nation of Islam has an international voice that has to be recognized by the international community, because they represent these Aborigine international people that are protected under international law.
What does that mean for me? Like little old Taylor Andre, I'm just now finding out I might have family that...
Taylor Andre, what all that means? It means rights. It means superior rights. The United States Trust was established under the Onondaga Trust, or the Six Nations Trust. In other words, the Indians had created a constitutional structure way before the European arrived. After the European arrived, the Indian helped him to develop his own constitution. His own constitution. So the United States Trust is an inferior trust to the Indian Trust. The Indian Trust, being the superior trust, protects the Indian people under international law. Under international law, not under codified U.S. law and territorial law and sagging your pants, I'm going to lock you up law. None of that, but real law, real international law of nations law. When you're protected that way, then you're no longer adhesion by these constructs of you're going to go to jail for this, you're going to go to jail for that, I'm going to take your children because I don't like the way your hair looks, those types of things. You fall into a category of human beings, because African Americans are not human beings, they are chattel property. They are chattel, and when you do the long yard study and find out where the African American came from, Jesse Jackson, you should have never come up with that term in 1986. Because that's what the white man wanted to take place, because he's been trying to create an immigrant out of the Negro since he got here.
But we're indigenous to this land.
But now that he's an African American, he's just like a French American, a Mexican American, a Chinese American. He's an immigrant now. While he was a Negro, he was that dark thing that was running on these lands before that. And in law, he had rights as a Negro. But now those rights as a Negro are gone, because Negro has been removed from law.
So, okay, Negro's been removed from law. Indian's been removed from law. What can I identify as that will give me no longer chattel property status, but gives me status?
If you bring forth that birth certificate that says colored on it, whether it's your birth certificate, your mother's birth certificate, or your grandmother's birth certificate, your grandfather's, your uncle's, your great uncle, if it says colored and he's colored, then you're colored. If it says colored, Congress ruled last year that colored is American Indian.
So we need to go back and look at our
You need to
ancestors,
pull those birth
your
certificates out.
mamas.
Yes.
So if we go down to, let's say, here, the South Expo, what is that expo called?
If you go down to the Bureau of Vital Statistics
And go get birth
and
certificates.
ask for your birth certificate, those birth certificates are being changed to African American. Every last one of them are being changed.
But how?
Because they control their system.
But you can't just change my birth certificate, though.
Why not? I created it.
This is real life.
I created the birth certificate, so I can change anything, any construct that I've created, I can change.
617-282-0062. Like my soul, my cells aren't feeling right now, because we had Sabir Bey in the building, and he was talking about status, and he was talking about what it meant when you check those boxes and what you identify as, and then once you identify as this thing, you're now labeled as this thing. You can't go back and say, hold on, but no, I don't want to be an African American anymore. I want to be something else. Nah, you've been identifying as African American this whole time, so that's what you is.
The federal government is also allowing individuals, allowing their staff, if an individual comes in and they check the box and it says this, and the agent happens to look at you and feel and believe that you're not what you say in the box, they're allowed to change the box now.
They're allowed to change. You can change my box.
They are allowed to change the box. The protections comes from individuals like yourself, Taylor, that finds that birth certificate. Come to NAAIP. We help to move you forward in restructuring your existence under trust. Because what we do with you, we assist you in developing from your tribal heritage, from your ancestral heritage, a trust charter. See, the United States exists under a trust charter. All of its people exist under that trust charter. All of its agencies exist under that trust charter. So when you, as an Aborigine, being from the original lines, establish a trust charter and a ratification and the Constitution, you've created a government.
Okay, but pause, because I'm confused and I'm conflicted, because on one hand, I believe that as an African American, I no longer have rights. They're changing the birth certificates, so it's not like I can just go down there and say I want my birth certificate, and now it still says colored on it. It used to. It got ripped up. I moved. I can't find it anymore. Now it says African American. So I can't exactly prove that, because systems are changing. It's their system.
You're in trouble. And that's the fate of millions and millions of Negro in this country. They're in trouble, and they don't even know that they're in trouble.
Let's say, for instance, my grandmother, I'm calling Nana as soon as we get off air. Shantora, get your mother's birth certificate and do what you got to do. Let's say, for instance, my great-grandmother's birth certificate says colored, but her death certificate says African American.
They're changing them like that. If it says colored, then you come running to us, and we're going to satisfy that colored birth certificate.
Since they changed it, okay, the birth certificate says colored, the death certificate says African American. At what point, what rights do I have to say, you done change you can't change who I am?
The grandmother is, which one came first, the chicken or the egg? The birth came first, and the birth was acknowledged before their conscious mind decided they wanted to start changing things. My mother's birth certificate says colored. My father says colored. Mine says Negro. My great-grandmother says Indian. My great-grandfather says Choctaw. So how did Choctaw and Chickasaw and the Shawnee come and be me, a Negro? Ultimately, they tried to classify my children as African American, but I refused the birth certificates when they were born.
How do you do that? How do you refuse a birth certificate? Isn't that that's my account number? That's my chattel property, right? That's my.
The only way that you can refuse a birth certificate is that you must not be a U.S. citizen.
Do you have to pay taxes as a U.S. citizen?
It depends on the classification of citizen. There's different classification of citizen. There's a small C citizen, a big C citizen. There's a foreign national citizen. Most Indians exist as foreign nationals. And the tax classification, it depends on how your business is set up and how your operations is set up. For Aborigines, there's no taxation because we operate under international.
No representation.
We operate under international venue, 100%. The trust is established under the Hague Trust Convention. And from the trust, once you've established your trust, place yourself and your property up under the trust, you're no longer a U.S. citizen out here. You're a foreign national. And as a foreign national, according to the Constitution, you have all the rights as all of the citizens in this country.
So as an African American right now, I have no rights.
You have no rights.
Hold on. As an African
American, you have no rights.
I'm a Trinidadian American.
You have more rights than an African American.
What?
You heard it correct.
I was born in Trinidad. I came to America. I have more rights than the people who were born here?
Yes, because you have a place called home. The African American has no home. He thinks he's from Africa. It's a mental construct.
You make me want to cry.
Because he thinks he's from Africa, he has no home.
You make me want to cry right now.
And because he has no home, then he's snatched up by whoever can snatch him up. The police, the state, any of the agencies can snatch you up and you are their property. That's why they can hold you and do those things, because you are a construct.